Hello everyone, it's Mr. Barden here. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter video. It's a follow-up to my previous one on creating classes for our objects. If you've happened to look into the textbook, I posted a link to that in the description of both the last video and this one, you'll notice that there's kind of a second big section of classes, and that is this portion right here, adding arguments to it. But it's not very long in that sense. So what I'm going to do is go through that today, but because this won't take super long, I'm also going to use it as a little bit of a review just to make a class. So with that being said, let's hop right into it and go. So I say we'll hop right into it. I just want to say this code will be in the description down below if you want to check it out. All right, so let's start just by making a class. I'm going to make a new class, and again, I like to go to the very bottom of my sketch in order just to make sure it's not inside of anything else. So I go to the very bottom and then add a few lines. We say it's a class, and then we have to give our class a name. This follows the same conventions as variables and functions and all of that stuff. So we want to have it be descriptive of what it's going to be, not starting with numbers, things like that, and it can't share a name with other things in the code. So let's just do just because I saw the red circles, just like that. But I want to point out one quick thing, and that is that classes tend to start with a capital letter just to indicate that they are a class for objects. So again, you'll see this here. It's not a hard rule. Like I can make this start with a lowercase r and we won't have any issues. It's just more of a convention, so you may notice that. So let's go in here. We need a few things. The first is just a few methods that tell us what to do and how to draw the thing on the screen in order to see it. So I'm going to start with the constructor, and this one's going to become important in a minute, so just don't forget that this exists. But this is where we basically build up all of the values for the object. So this is where we start seeing this dot. So again, this will serve as a template for an object that doesn't exist. But how can you assign values to a thing that doesn't exist yet? That's where we have this. And the word this, as you see, it's highlighted yellow on my screen to indicate it's important. The word this is going to say, hey, look at me, I'm special, I'm a placeholder. We're going to fill in the name of the object that we're getting made, that's getting made when we actually make it. So that's why we have this, and this is important. So we'll say this dot x, and we would assign it just a value. I'm going to give it a placeholder now. This dot y gets assigned to this dot diameter gets assigned 25. This dot color gets assigned red. We'll make it kind of transparent. Why not? Tidy that up. For now, I think this is just fine for what we're going to work with. So again, the constructor is where we essentially construct the object by giving it its various properties, just like we did with JSON, and assigning those to values. Again, these can all be updated as needed, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But before that, in order to, again, see anything, we have to tell our class how to draw these objects to the screen. I like to call mine appear, but it can be whatever you want to call it. Again, this is just a shorthand of the name of our method, the parentheses, and then the braces, and then we just list these inside of the larger class. So appear. I find using push and pop in order to kind of draw these in a unique state separate from other stuff tends to make your life a lot easier. So I like to add those here. You don't necessarily have to. fill. We're going to fill this with this dot C for this dot color. And we're just going to draw a simple red circle. This dot X, this dot Y, this dot D. So now we see nothing. So we've made the template for the object. We now need to create the object itself. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a global object essentially. So we'll say let my circle, and then I like to do this in setup, but you don't necessarily have to. My circle gets to be assigned to be a new instance of the red circle class. And we've made it there, but nothing's happened yet. We just have to, in the draw function, tell our object here, the one my circle, to appear on the screen. And boop, there we go. We've got our slightly transparent red circle right there. Maybe we want this to be a bit bigger. Boop, there we go. So that's everything I talked about in the previous video. Definitely check that out for a bit more detail, as well as the textbook. That was just kind of a short review to keep this from being a 35-second video. So what we have right here is the class, and the whole point of this video is being able to add arguments to our objects when we make them. Now, why might we want to do this? Well, it's going to be the same kind of idea as when we were making functions with different arguments, in the sense of it's going to be the same template of things that the computer is going to follow, but by putting in different values into the algorithm, we're going to have different results. That's why I could call multiple ellipse functions with different values in order to get different circles on the screen. Otherwise, it would just be identical every time you called it. So this lets us customize each of the different objects. So they'll all follow the same general template, but they'll all have unique properties. One way to think about this might be that, hey, all of us are, human beings watching this video, I'm assuming. But even though we all have the same general characteristics of a person, largely speaking, everyone is slightly different. Okay, maybe their hair is different, their face, their outfit, they're all slightly different from someone else. There may be some very, very close people and some identical twins, but there's always going to be minor differences and uniqueness, and that's what we have going on here. We have this class, and all of the objects we make in this class will have all of the things, but by giving them arguments, we will have a unique object each time we call it. So that being said, let's look at the constructor right here. So if you recall, when I said a few minutes ago, this is where we are building up the object and assigning its properties. And since we're going to be now filling in those properties with arguments, we just have to tweak this just a hair. So if you recall from making functions, and if you don't recall this, go check out those videos, we can list out arguments in the parentheses when we're defining the function. And that's what we're going to do here. So I want to be able to control the X location and the Y location and maybe the diameter. Diameter there. Because my class is red circle, I want all of them to be red. So, well, how about this? What if we instead got rid of the transparency, and we'll call this red amount. We can change exactly how red each of them are. Okay, so this is what we do next. We've listed out what we want our arguments to be. Now we need to utilize them here. So instead of assigning these a hard-coded value, we're going to add the name of our arguments that we listed to the appropriate place in the constructor, in the red amount right there. So boom, 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 that's that. We have to specifically say, hey, this dot x gets assigned to be whatever we've passed in for that argument. You can change the order here, but the order is important when we make the object, but they can effectively be anything. It's just important that you keep the names matching up inside of the constructor right here. That's kind of the most important bit. This is really identical to making a function with arguments at this stage. The next thing we have to do is whenever we're making the object, we now have to give it these arguments. And that's why when we made the object, we had to give it the parentheses. That's not the only reason, but that's the easy one to pull up. But this is where we would type them, just like calling a function. So we now have to give it an x argument. So maybe now, oh no, that won't work. Now we'll say boom, random and what else do we have? We need to do the diameter. And the red amount. Okay, so I've purposely made these all random numbers just to illustrate that we can change all of these things right here. So every time I'm refreshing this code, we are having a randomly sized, and maybe I'll just make it, between 10 and 50, between 25, and yeah, just so that way it's just a little more uniform. But at this point, every time I'm running this, we're getting a new object with random property values. That still follows the same class. It's still a red circle, but each one is slightly different. We could maybe see this a little bit more clearly if I did this. And that is doing this in a for loop. That's what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to real quick move my background function here. And then we're going to put this in a for loop. That's in a for loop. Let I be assigned 0. I is less than 30. Why not? I plus plus. Copy this. Paste that into the for loop. And paste this into the for loop. And now we should see boink 30 circles popping up. And they're all overlapping, of course, but at this point now we can very clearly see on the screen that we can make however many objects we want, and things can be random or not, or they can have a range. Values can come from wherever, but they're all part of the same class. You could call every single one of these a red circle, which was kind of the point. So they're all the same class, but with slightly different properties, different locations, different size, different amounts of red color in the fill. And that's what we have here, and we can keep running this and get a ton of different variations, but maybe I'll make that slightly bigger. But we can see that they're all the same class. So that's it. I'd say in a nutshell, that's really all there is to it. Is it just follows this? We're just combining what we did in classes with what we did in making custom functions into one thing. So we just, in the constructor for our classes, we add arguments into the parentheses there, and then we take the this dot values and assign them to those arguments. And then we just use this dot throughout the class. That's totally fine. And then when we make the new object, we now list off in its parentheses the arguments that we want to give it. Again, keep in mind that the order you type them here in the class is the order you need to type them here. So this first random number is going to get filled into the first argument here, which is x, which then gets assigned to the property this.x because that's what we told it to do. So again, the order is important, but it can be whatever you want. Okay. So I'm just going to tweak this just a hair, so that way there's a bit more to play with. Not 250, 350. Save. Tidy. Run. There we are. And we'll make this a bit more. Okay, cool. So this was just a fun little sketch here I've got. The one last thing I want to cover before we end this is using a method with these. And again, we can get the same thing happening here. We just have to make the method. So maybe this will be, how about this? We'll call this method make blue. We're going to make it blue. And we'll say that there. Let's say this dot C gets assigned. And then instead will be 0. And just say... That's the Greek. There we go. Okay, so all I've got here is that now whenever we call this function, then it will make the circle be a random shade of blue instead of a random shade of red. Wow. So in order to work that out, and I'm going to just make it the same range, 25, I'm just going to add one more line up here, one more thing, not necessarily one more line. And we'll just say, if my circle, or no. We'll say if I modulo 4 is equal to 0, then my circle dot make blue. Just for the sake of making the changes before we draw anything, I'm just going to put this after that. So what we're going to have going here now to break all of this down as the last little bit is we've got a for loop. This for loop is going to be making the 50 red circles you currently see on the screen. These circles are all objects from the red circle class, but they're all randomly generated. So we have right here on line 8. Every 4 iterations of the for loop, however, that's what this conditional is going on. I'm not going to break down modulo in this video, but every 4 iterations of the for loop, so let's just make this a multiple of 40, it will run the make blue method, which will hopefully, if we did it all right, turn the circle blue, and then we'll draw it. So I'm going to just run the code again, and we should see a mix of mostly red to a little bit of blue circles. And we do. All right, so at this point, it's going to be exactly 4-to-1 in terms of what we've got for the circles, in terms of red to blue, but we could tweak that if I wanted to have, more blue circles. Now we get a half and half mix. I kind of like that. Maybe we'll make this a bit higher. Just to get a fun little mix of red and blue circles. So that's where I'm going to be wrapping it up for this video. So I'm just going to move on into my outro bits. Again, just to briefly reiterate everything, we've made this class. The class is just a very basic red circle with the ability to become a blue circle if we want it to. The class takes 4 arguments, and that is just the location and diameter of the circle, and then how red it is. whenever we change it to blue, it also is changing how blue it is to be a random value. We're just making 60 of these new red circles, all of them randomly set for the properties, and then every other circle we are making blue, and then we're drawing it. So that way we don't draw it and then change the color value. That could cause some issues right there. We're actually not doing anything in draw, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. And that will be it. So I'm all right. So OBS started getting a little angry as I was recording my outro, so I'm gonna just hop into this one, as you've probably noticed. I was just wrapping up and saying that this is going to be the last little bit of videos on these general coding topics for me for a little while. This is the end of that kind of intro unit to the course I teach. I will be working on a new set of videos, and a few of them have already come out, about graphics and coding with the graphics, but specifically the P5 Play coding library. That's used for a lot of game engines and 2D graphics and things of that nature, particularly with sprites and animations and things. So stay tuned for those from me. Lastly, if you learned something, enjoyed the video, definitely consider liking it, giving it a subscription to the channel. It's free and it does help out. If you have any questions or concerns about anything, definitely put those in the comments. I love responding to comments as much as I get the chance to. And anything else, just all the YouTube stuff. So that's going to be it from me, and I will see you all the next time that I see you. Bye.